So good afternoon, everyone. This is Monique from the Organic Trade Association. Thank you very much for joining us for our brand registration in China webinar. I am very excited to be working with Jane Lee on this project. I'll tell you a little bit about Jane now so you know that we're dealing with a true expert here. Jane is the principal at AFC and a Chinese native currently based in DC. Jane has about 15 years of experience in food and agriculture and has had extensive experience with the industry association, government networks in China. Her firm specializes in providing business development intelligence in the ag and food industry space, primarily in China and other Asian markets. And prior to leading AFC, she established ProMar's China office and was a project manager for all China-based activities for that organization. Prior to that, she was several years as a senior marketing specialist for the Agricultural Trade Office for the USDA FAS Beijing. So she was a senior advisor to U.S. companies and producer organizations on the Chinese market, really helping them get their products selling successfully in China. So we're very lucky that Jane is working with us on this, and I know that she has some really good information to share. Before we get started, I am curious, you'll notice on your dashboard the opportunity for some polls. I'm going to launch one now just to see who we have on the phone. The first question is, do you currently export to China? And if you could very quickly answer that, that'd be great. Okay, right now it's looking like majority of folks are a no. So this is good. This is a perfect time for you to be learning about the correct steps to take to protect your brand and your brand identity once you enter that market. The next question I have is a pretty straightforward follow-up there. Are you do you have your brand registered? So for the folks who said yes, or those who perhaps haven't started exporting yet but have started the brand registration process, does anyone on the line currently have their brands registered in China? Okay, it's looking like maybe one or two folks have answered yes, but the majority of you are a no. So again, this is going to be very valuable information for you, and I'm glad that you were able to join us. So I am going to, Jane, I'm not sure if we have lost Sonia.
Hi, Monique. I'm back on. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay. Oh, no problem, no problem. We just did a couple of polls, and Sonia, if you could advance to the agenda slide, that'd be great.
Okay. Hold on one second.
Perhaps you can hand over controls to Jane, and she can take it from here.
Okay, Jane, did that work?
Not working. I'm not working for me yet. Hold on.
If you play your mouse, Jane.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, great. All right, technology is key. Okay, so we're going to jump in here. Jane, do me a favor and advance to the agenda slide, please.
All right.
There we go. Okay, so before we dig into Jane's expertise, I just have a couple of quick facts to share about e-commerce in China right now. Jane will go through some background on, too quick there, Jane. Let me get through that agenda. Thank you. Jane will go through some background on brand registration, the components of a protected brand in China, and then we have digested all of this information into 7 steps for you to register your brand, which hopefully will be an easy reference guide for you to return to as you go through this quite extensive, detail-oriented process. And then we have some resources that are available as well. So I want to make sure that throughout the presentation, if you have a clarifying question, if there's something that you're not quite understanding from the material we're covering, please, please, please use your hand raise function to ask questions throughout the webinar. Of course, we would like to keep that content specific. We're not interested in doing company details right now. We can save that for the end. But if there's something that we're covering that you're just not quite getting, please do use that hand raise function, and we will address those questions as we go along. If you're having a question, it's likely that someone else on the webinar is having the same thought or concern. So don't be shy. Please use that, and hopefully we'll get more out of Jane while she's on the phone than what we have just listed here on the slide. Okay, Jane, I'm ready for that e-commerce slide. Thank you. So just a couple of quick stats. We know that the e-commerce mechanism in China is a very interesting feature for organic for a few reasons. One, you don't need to comply to Chinese labeling, and there are all of these tariff incentives for doing cross-border e-trade. That aside, overall, e-commerce market in China is still growing despite an overall economy slowdown in China. For the first half of 2015, as you can see, there were $250 billion in sales through e-commerce. That is up 48% over the same period in 2014, so almost double the size. And for 2015 total estimate, they're looking at $585 billion. So this is one of the major ways of procurement for the everyday customer in China. That can't be denied. Of course, inbound cross-border e-commerce is smaller than the total, but it still accounts for a big portion of activity, $62 billion. If you put that in context, the overall U.S. organic market is $39 billion. So this is almost double our entire organic industry domestically. We're the largest market in the world. And that figure has more than 5 times increased since 2013. So in 2 years, we're at 5 times the size for imported purchases, imported products being purchased through cross-border e-trade. So just want to give everyone that background as we jump into the question at hand. Of course, we know this is a very, very attractive market for a lot of reasons, but at the same time, protecting the integrity of your brand and protecting the integrity of the organic system is a priority for us all. And Jane is going to share with us some really important information on how to do that. So Jane, I will let you take it away, and folks, please do use that hand raise function if you have questions.
Okay, thank you, Monique. Good afternoon, everyone. And it has been my greatest pleasure to work with OTA on this important topic, is to protect your brand and identity in China before you go into the Chinese market. And many of you, as Monique put the pool just now, that are relatively new to the China market. Now, why it is important and how you do the brand registration is what I'm going to cover today, and hopefully you will find I'm going to get it through slowly. So as Monique mentioned, please feel free to raise some questions if for particularly content specific, and if I'm going too slow or too fast, feel free to let me know as well. And first, in today's presentation, I'm going to just introduce a little bit why it is important to register your brand. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the current environment of intellectual property in China, and then a little bit about how the enforcement system works there in China in terms of intellectual property, and also the things that you need to know before you register a brand. And then I said I put all this complicated process into, I will call, 7 steps to register brand. And also last, I will talk a little bit about how to choose, why it is important, how to choose a Chinese brand name. Before I get started, first, let's talk, Monique mentioned about what exciting market for China's e-commerce it is. What I'd want to talk about here to supplement Monique's e-commerce is China's food import market. China food import has been increasing about 15% per year, and expected to reach $77 billion by 2018. Organic food has been playing an increasing role in this, even though it started from very small. And right now, the organic food consumption accounts for about 1% of the total food consumption in China, which is much lower than in the US and other Western countries. But the growth is impressive. It has been tripled since 2007. That's over the past 8 years. And current products of import for organic, mainly consumer products that like dairy products, processed products, especially baby food, and there are very small amount of organic produce is imported. And this growth has a lot to do with China's changing consumers. With the living standard increasing, Chinese has a group of I will call upper middle income consumers with children. They're the ones that have a strong force to driving the food import. They see the imported products, food products particularly, as safer, healthier, and higher quality. And the other changing is the brand awareness. Traditionally, Chinese consumers has been brand hoppers. They hop from one to the other. When the times they are quite price sensitive. But now there is a trend that the consumers, they have aware enough about the brand. They're very cautious about choosing the brand they're comfortable with, and they're very likely they will stay with it. This trend is particularly clear in the food consumptions because they associate brands with quality. So with that said, with how important, Chinese consumers that actually really becomes brand awareness, so I would say it is important to register brand in China at the market entry stage in order to eliminate your risk and also take advantage of optimizing the emerging opportunities in the market. Now, you may have the question say, well, I'm registered in my home country. Do I automatically protect in China? The answer is no. And then you may also underestimate the potential risk of a brand abuse in China. Some of you may also have the question, say, it may be how much does it cost? How long does it take? And in today's presentation, I will respond hopefully to all of your concerns and guide you through. Before that, let's look at China's current intellectual property environment. I have a list of data here. It shows very clearly that, say, estimated of 20% of consumer products in China are counterfeit. And in terms of U.S. food and agriculture products, 20 to 30% are counterfeit in China. And the U.S. producers are facing the loss of $84 billion a year from the intellectual property infringement in China. U.S. food is associated with high quality and has a very good image among the Chinese consumers. For that particular reason, disreputable Chinese marketers, they have been using a number of ways to misleading Chinese consumers to believe that their products are U.S. origin. I just give you a couple of examples here. For example, counterfeited labels. You go to a supermarket, you will find, California pistachios, California almonds, and California walnuts, but actually they could be from anywhere in the world or domestically made. They're not necessarily from California. Those called counterfeited labels. In the pharmacies in China, it's quite common even nowadays to find Wisconsin ginseng. They label Wisconsin ginseng, but they're not from Wisconsin. They're from Canada. They may be domestic produce products as well. The other way to use is misleading brand names. For example, Sunkist has a reputation in China for citrus products. So, if you go to for example, the wholesale market in Beijing, you can see the products, lemons and oranges, the label with Sunkist, to confusing to consumers and associate themselves with Sunkist. The other is misleading trademarks. You will see some trademarks that look very familiar to you, but it's not what you think it is. For example, you can see like top 10 brand canned tomatoes. Their image of the trademark looked very similar to Del Monte, but they're not Del Monte. All those products, in addition to distribute through traditional channels like hypermarket, supermarket, they have been used by those disreputable business operators online. Has been used a platform for them distributing the counterfeited products online as well, due to the expansion of e-commerce in China. A Chinese consumer may order a case of, Australian milk, they think, but but it's labeled as Australian milk, but it's actually a domestic made product. Or they think they order products come New Zealand butter, Anchor brand, label is Anchor brand, but actually is not, is domestic made. So this day-to-day actually is fairly common in China. So this makes, I would say, the IPR protection in China for the U.S. food and agriculture products, it's seriously lacking right now. Fresh fruit, dry fruit, nuts, beverage, processed products, packaged products are among the highest risk. And basically any brands that a trademark has high value or has high consumer recognition, they're all at the risk of being mimicked or taken advantage of. If your brand is not registered, you are at the greatest danger in this battle. What I do want to point out is, despite of those ongoing challenges, Chinese government realized the challenges they're dealing with, and they have shown, demonstrated a strong design to improve the system, to address the complaints from the international community, to improve the international image. So they have done various things, provisions to fight trademark squatting, expand protection of trademarks, streamlining the application process. They also have done patent, copyright, trade secret, there's laws and regulation reform. And most recently, in late 2014, China established the first court to handle IP cases in Beijing. At the same time, the Supreme Court set up the IP Protection Research Center to train the technical officers for investigation. In other words, if you get your brand registered, your ability to exercise your right or seek protection in China is increasing day by day. So let's take a quick look at China's intellectual property enforcement system. I would say China doesn't really have an intellectual enforcement system until 20 years ago. So it's a system that developed very fast over the past 30 years, which, unlike US, it's a slow developed system. So China doesn't have a trademark law until 1982, and also has been revised 3 times ever since. In 1993, 2001, the latest amendment happened in 2014. Also, the State Council promulgated the regulation on the implementation of the trademark law in 1983, and also the new implementation was issued in 2002. If you are interested, I think it's worth it to take a look at the English version of the trademark law in China that you can find by clicking the link that I provided on the presentation. The other efforts Chinese government has to be made is to establish a state intellectual property office in 1998. Chinese government has a view to coordinate all the intellectual property enforcement by merging patents, trademarks, and copyright into one authority. But this has not happened yet. That makes why what I'm going to talk next is the enforcement system that's complicated. You will see a complicated chart with enforcement agencies, key functions. I kind of summarize here. There are actually major 4 administrative enforcement authorities in China for intellectual property and the 3 criminal enforcement authorities. I'm not going to go over one by one here just to save time, but what I would point out is there are lots of overlapping responsibilities, and the key, actually, the one property if you end up register your brand, you are dealing with most is the trademark office of the state on Industry and Commerce, which we call SAIC. And so, as I said, like any Western countries, if you don't want to get to the point that you want to take your brand or trademark infringement to the court, go through the legal to the court, because it can be very time-consuming and it costs a lot of money. So even though the number of trademark cases still with the court, Chinese court, is increasing these days, but this is not the route that people normally take. I would say the most important agency here are the administrative agencies, authorities in China, like SAIC, China Trademark Offices, China Customs, and ISO AQSAQ. And as I mentioned just now, SAIC, the trademark offices, and the local offices are the most common choice that you would have to deal with. Okay, before we talk about the steps to register brand, I will want to go over the things that I think is important for you to know before register brand. Many of you will ask, when I'm going to start? I would say immediately. Unlike US, China is a first to file trademark registration country, while US is a first to use country, which means in China, it doesn't matter who used the trademark first or who originated the trademark. Whoever registered first have the right to use the trademark. Therefore, it makes particularly essential for you to register trademark in China before you even enter the market. And also, your brand name, your trademark wouldn't be protected up until the registration is completed. And also, China has a centralized registration system, which means every single application goes to the trademark office in Beijing. Foreign applicants, if you don't have a residency in China or you don't have a place of business in China, you are required to submit the application through the local Chinese trademark agent. I would say I put a highlight here. It is important to make sure you, the trademark owner, the brand name owner, is the applicant on the application, not the trademark agent. The next we need to look into is the...
Jane,
yes.
I have a quick question here. When you say register, is submitting your application enough to start receiving the protections of the trademark application, or does your application actually have to be accepted, acknowledged, and filed?
Right. Your trade name, your brand name will not be protected until the registration is completed.
So approval received from the Chinese government.
That's correct. On the other
Understood.
on the other hand, if you get your process started, then somebody else, they would not be able to register something that's similar or identical to your brand name. So it's a first to file system. So you have to get on the line, get to the first.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now let's look at the classification and sub-classification. China uses the international classification of goods and services under the NICE agreement. So there are 45 products and service classes. What is different, it is China further dividing these classes into subclasses. That's where the complication comes from. For example, international class 25, which is for clothing, footwear, headgear. But under this international class, China has 12 additional subclasses under this international class 25. Identical or closely similar brands, they are actually allowed to coexist under the same international class, which means if you only register your class and you think you registered the immediate subclass, but you didn't cover the relevant subclass, somebody can come in, they can register something very similar to your brand name under the same international class, and can be very confusing for the consumers in future. With that said, I would really suggest you to seek adequate protection to begin with, to make sure your products with the you'd register your class and subclass that relevant to your products and business. You covered it all to avoid future confusions. And also, in the system, in the registration system, it is per class, per registration. It is important to go through your trademark agency to seek their advice on how to classify your products in order to get adequate protection. The language of the application is fairly straightforward. It can only be made in Chinese. And also, you may have the questions how long it takes and how long it's valid, the application valid, the registration valid. Right now, the process takes up to 18 to 24 months. And also, as I mentioned just now, a trademark can only be protected once the registration is completed. If there's no complications and oppositions from the public or to your application, the China Trademark Office right now is working towards getting it done in 10 months. Anyway, the overall trend is they are actually streamline the process. They try to make it as fast as they possibly can. Once you are registered, this is good for 10 years. Then you can, after 10 years, you can apply for a pronoun for another 10 years and so on. On the other hand, if you, once you register, but you don't use your brand name in China for 3 continuous years, then they may cancel your registration. So that's just the practice right now. Cost of registration. As I mentioned just now, 1 application per class. For each class, they charge $500. That's the China Trademark Office. That will including 10 items of goods. Now, any extra items under the same class you want to add it to the application is $25 per item. Then on top of that, there will be lawyer fee or legal fee that are charged by the trademark registration agent. But this kind of fee really vary by the experience your agency has and also the service they provide. Just to give you an example, that recently I have a client that has completed the brand registration in China. It's a farm in the U.S. actually. They register 1 class about 12 sub-items. It takes them about, I would say, $2,000, and it takes them 20 months. So they started the process less than 2 years ago, and they just recently get the registration certificate. So it's just an example, but the process right now can be faster than that. Now, I kind of categorize the steps to register brand as 7 steps, just easier for we to look into. I would say the first step is to identify a trademark agent. I have provided a list of Chinese and foreign law firms in the end of this presentation as a they can provide trademark registration services for your reference. Reach out to them. Most of them can communicate. Actually, all of them can communicate in English. So feel free to reach out to them to start it with them. The next step is to decide if your trademark is eligible for registration. It's surely fairly simple. It is just to start your basic research in the link I provided, just to see if there are any identical or similar marks already registered. The trademark agent will conduct this preliminary research before they sub the application for you, or before even they suggested you to file the application. The next step, which is fairly straightforward, is to prepare documents. The document that requires not complicated. It's basically an application. The application form can be downloaded from a website, from China's trademark website. And I also have a link at my last, the takeaway messages slides. And also you have to provide 6 copies of the trademark and also a power of attorney that's authorizing your trademark registration agent to submit the application on your behalf. And once your application package is prepared, the number 4 step is for the trademark agent to submit the application to the China Trademark Office in Beijing. As I mentioned just now, per application, per class, and also foreign language trademarks and trademarks in Chinese languages, they require different registrations. Number 5 step is for the China Trademark Office to review the application. Once the application is submitted to them, they will review it, see if your material is complete, if you are eligible for registration, and if your trademark meets the criteria, and then they will issue a filing receipt for application of registration. I would say why I will point out the filing receipt is important, because the effective date of registration is established once you receive your filing receipt. In other words, if anybody wants to register identical brand name, then after you, they will be, then trademark office have the right to say no to that person. Which means even your brand name is not registered, there is a gap between they receive your application and then actually the registration is issued. But during that gap, they can actually, nobody can submit an application of the brand name that's identical to yours. So the step 6 is the trademark receive preliminary approval or is rejected. If the trademark office determines the application package is complete and there's no similar or identical trademark has been previously registered, they will give you a preliminary approval and published in the Trademark Gazette. Then your trademark application is subject to public opposition for a period of 3 months. If the trademark office decides to reject the application, then they will send you a written notice. Once you receive that writing notice within the 15 days, you can actually request an administrative review by Trademark Review and Adjudication Board. And also, there is another 3 months period further for you to supplement, provide additional material, detailed arguments, supporting evidence, etc. If they still object to you, then you can go file your appeals to the further, like Beijing Intellectual Property Court or People's Court. Actually, this happens. This is just a legal procedural, but it's very rarely happens. The last step is registrations finalized. During the 3 months, if there is no party file opposition to the trademark that you file, then the trademark office is ready to register a trademark. They will publish a notice on the Trademark Gazette again, and also they will issue you a trademark registration certificate, which is in Chinese, and your trademark agent should be able to translate into English for you. Once you receive that certificate, your brand name registration is complete and you're protected under the trademark law in China. So before I go to the next adopting a Chinese name, I want to just to see if anybody has any questions about the steps, though.
You know, we are not getting any questions coming through chat, Jane, but this is a good opportunity for us to perhaps unmute the line for a moment, Sonia, and see if anyone prefers to ask a question verbally.
Okay. Jane, I'm going to take back controls for a minute.
Okay.
Hi, this is Jessica from Amy's Kitchen. Monique, can you hear me?
Amy's Kitchen.
Hi, just as a FYI, I couldn't find anywhere to actually ask questions or raise my hand. I thought I knew, but I couldn't find any of the options there. I do have a question. Jen, you had said that, so if we start applying and then, or if we apply for it and then we don't do anything in the country for 3 years, it might be revoked. When does the date start? Is it when, by the time we actually get the approval, or is it by the moment we file in the first place, since it seems that it could take up to 2 years for us to get approval?
I'm doing the audio, not the computer. That stupid thing.
The question is, yep, the question for you, Jane, is whether or not, again, back to that first to file, is there any protection allotted once you have that application in process?
It's not necessarily that. It's more the timeline of when the 3 years start. Is it
muted?
Then you have three. If you don't use your brand for 3 years after your registration is completed, it's approved, then your trademark is subject to cancellation.
And I'm sorry, Jane, I think you got cut off there.
Okay.
Leading up to the registration being approved, once the application has been submitted by the trademark agent, does the brand have any protection whatsoever?
Okay. Once the application submitted, there's a couple of key timeline there. First is you receive your filing receipt. Once you receive that filing receipt, that means your case is established in the trademark office. Then anybody who would not be able to register a similar or closely identical brand in the same subclass or class anymore. That's the one critical timeline. The other critical timeline is the registration is finalized. The registration certificate is issued. Once that's issued, then you are protected for 10 years. Or if you don't use your brand for 3 years, then your brand name is subject to cancellation.
Understood. I think that answers Jessica's question. Folks, I'm not sure if it's specific to Jessica or the entire group, but if you're unable to submit questions using the hand raise function, please go ahead and throw them in chat. I'm monitoring that, and I just sent a note to y'all. So if something pops up, please feel free to use that option. Jane, I think you're good to continue.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Monique. So when I go through the steps that register brand, what I do want to mention particularly is to choose a Chinese brand name. I personally think it's very important, and there are many lessons to learn that if you don't choose a Chinese brand name. Actually, the registration for trademark in Roman letters and characters, which most of your brand name will have, does not protect the trademark against the use of or registration of the same or similar trademark written in Chinese. As a matter of fact, most of Chinese consumers, they don't even know what the English name it is, but they will recognize the Chinese name of the products. How to choose the Chinese name? I would say get the help of your trademark agent or the Chinese partner you work with, and to get it right to begin with, to avoid, costly mistakes from the very beginning. Everything matters: the meaning, the sound, the tone, even the appearance of the character. They will really, they can all affect the brand's reputation and the image. So I actually list a couple of suggestions here to choose the Chinese name. I would call it phonetic translation, literal, and a combination of both. Phonetic translation, which is fairly straightforward, you just translate it exactly as how it sounds. For example, McDonald's in China, known to the Chinese consumers as 麦当劳. That's exactly, it doesn't really have any meaning in Chinese, but that's exactly how McDonald's sound. And also like Adidas, they go by the name Adidas. That's also, there's no meaning to it, but it just is what it sounds like. You can also do literal translation. It works when your trademark, your name, has a distinguished meaning. For example, Sunmaid, they choose the brand name in China, 阳光少女, as exactly that's what the Sunmaid means in Chinese. Apple Computer, they just use Apple, the 苹果, that's which is the Chinese for Apple. And in some cases, you know, they do a combination of both, a literal and a phonetic translation. For example, Starbucks. Starbucks, you know, is known as 星巴克 in China, where 星 is the literal translation for star, and 巴克 is the phonetic translation. So actually, they do the combination of this both. The best combination is it sounds like the same as the English one, and also has a positive meaning. Coca-Cola has done a wonderful job in this area. You know, for example, Coca-Cola, you know, Chinese consumer know this as 可口可乐. It sounds like Coca-Cola, but also in Chinese it has a meaning. It means it tastes good and be happy. So these are all that you can techniques you can use when you pick up the Chinese name, and but it is important to pick up to register a Chinese brand name. So before I have a wrapped up messages for you to take away with, just to highlight some of the key points that have been mentioned in today's presentation. First is your registration in your home country does not protect you in China. So the best protection in China is to prevention. And also China, unlike US, is the first to file registration country versus first to use in the US. So whoever gets the file first has the right to use the trademark in that market. And also start early, immediately, I would say, and seek advice of your trademark agent to make sure your protection is adequate. And also to make sure you, the brand name, the trademark owner, as the applicant of the application, not your agent. And also register broadly. Don't just consider an immediate class for the products to be sold, but also all the relevant classes and the subclasses that you might want to cover all, just in case somebody come in and register something identical to your brands. And also consider choose a Chinese name to register, as in many cases Chinese consumers, they will recognize Chinese name. We wouldn't know the English name. And also your registered trademark enrollment letters does not protect you against the use or registration of the similar or same trademark written in Chinese. Last, again, I highlight the 7 steps here. It's fairly straightforward in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in each step, you can actually monitor the progress, the whole progress from the website. In each step, there is a website you can go to. You can do a preliminary research of your trademark for eligibility of registration. You can download your application from the website. And also, you can check the status of the application from the China Trademark Office website. And also, once it's published in the Trade Gazette for the public opposition, you can chase in that too. You can see it. And even once the registration is completed, they should put you online as a certified registered trademark online. So it's all, you can all find that online. It's all public. So in the last two slides, I provide the Chinese and the foreign law firms, mostly in Beijing, because application has to be submitted in Beijing. It's a centralized system that you can use as a reference that you can go to when you start your process. So this is pretty much what I have to cover today. Monique, so do we have any questions so far from the audience, or?
I had muted myself there. We have not had any questions come in through chat. So folks, now is the best time for you to ask those questions.
Oh, we got one.
Let's see.
I show that there is a question
From Bridget, but Bridget, I do not see any text written in your question. So maybe I will find your line directly and unmute you. Bridget's question is, how is organic certification at this point? In order to sell your product through traditional retail mechanisms in China, you do need to be certified to the Chinese organic program. You will need Chinese organic certification. The loophole that is provided through e-commerce is the ability to sell products through cross-border e-trade that do not comply with labeling requirements in China, therefore would not require Chinese organic certification to call your product organic. So if you are interested in selling your products in traditional retail, then yes, you must get Chinese organic certification. If you're interested in exploring e-commerce, there are likely different opportunities there for you to do so without having a Chinese organic certificate for your product. Okay, any other questions? No questions at all. Interesting. All right, I had a feeling that might be the case. The time is I'm in Mountain Standard Time, so it's almost 1:20 here for me. I will leave just one more minute open for any last takers on asking Jane a question. She is the expert, so now is the time. All right, I don't see anyone taking me up on that offer, so we will go ahead and call it a close. For those on the line, you will receive a PDF copy of the presentation to use as a reference tool. And of course, my information and Jane's information is on the very last slide. So if you have any questions as you're going through this process, do not hesitate to ask us. We are happy to help, and of course, Jane is a valuable resource if you're interested in digging deeper into the opportunities you may have in that market. Okay, so with that, we will close, and thank you all very much for joining us. Hope everyone has a lovely afternoon.